Hi, Mark. Welcome.
We like to call it the real Jersey Shore, Patrick.
I'll have to come visit one of these days.
You should. You should. It's a beautiful little town.
I bet it
So
is.
my question today is about the phrase or the term, not term, and I guess it is phrase, but the do this in remembrance of me
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to do this in memory of me, because I have a lot of conversations with Protestants talking about the significance of the Eucharist, whereas sometimes if I attend a Protestant service, I hear them use the phrase, do this in remembrance of me. But when I'm at Catholic Mass, they say, do this in memory of me. And I love to stress the point that this is, when you're receiving him, you are remembering yourself with Christ. You are becoming
Mm-hmm.
one, well, he's becoming one with you, or you're becoming one with him in remembrance. But then they love to point out, but why do you say memory? As if it is a consideration of him as opposed to becoming one with him.
Mm-hmm. Well, I
Does
think
that make
it's
sense? So I'm kind of wondering, where does the term come from? Or I mean, what would be the specific translation of that? And
mhm.
when did we start using memory? I asked my priest, but I didn't. I wasn't really clear about the significance of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the Greek
Does that make
word
sense?
is Go ahead. Is there something more?
No, no. Mike, I was just asking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes sense. The Greek word that's used in the at least the translation of the almost certainly Aramaic or Hebrew words that Christ used at the Last Supper. I'm certain that he didn't say these words in Greek, but the Greek rendering of that term that would have been used there is anamnesis. Sometimes you'll hear people pronounce it anamnesis, but it just means remembrance. And if you look at for example, the Strong's Greek Concordance, it gives a number of the different variants of how it could be translated, and it's a remembering, a recollection, a remembrance. Now you could say, well, that's sort of the same thing as a memory of, and that's true, it is. But essentially, it has a more of an active implication that this is rather than just a memory that sits in your mind. You are doing the remembering. You are doing the this in remembrance of Christ, and so that active aspect of the word is the understanding that the church has always had, that this is something that Christ said to the apostles: do this in doing this in memory of me. You're actually accomplishing what you're remembering. You're doing the thing that I'm doing, and in so doing, you are remembering it and doing it at the same time. Now, I suspect that there is a tendency on the part of some Protestants to want to minimize or at least downplay that idea and make it simply a memory because they don't agree with the Catholic Church's teaching that this is, actually fulfilling Christ's commandment there and all of the things that go into it, including transubstantiation and all. So maybe for Good Book Baptist or some other maybe low church Protestant group. And by low church, I'm referring to non-liturgical versus a high church, more liturgical group like, say, Episcopalians or some Lutherans. So perhaps the reason that they're emphasizing it that way is to eliminate as much as possible any notion that they're actually doing something where the bread and the wine change, or the bread and the grape juice, as the case may be, change. I wonder if that subtlety might be why you see a distinction like that between the Catholic and the typical Protestant way of talking about it.
Hmm. And that is, I mean, they like to split hairs, find any chink in the armor, and when they hear the word memory, they're saying, well, it's just a complete consideration. Like, for instance, the Baptists would say there is absolutely no presence. I'm Catholic, so I absolutely believe in the true presence. My wife is Presbyterian, and I have this conversation with her minister all the time. They kind of
Mm-hmm.
stand in the middle and say, well, it's both true. You're both right. And I'm like, that's really convenient. you know?
Yeah, it's
But
convenient if you don't have to come down and have to take a stand. That it is true that both aspects are true, but if you limit it solely to it's just a memory, it's just an ordinance, we just do it because Jesus said to do it, but it doesn't really do anything, then that would be missing the heart of the meaning there, be missing the heart of the passage. And I think this is the best way for you to maybe help somebody pass through that type of difficulty, is to say, all right, let's for the moment suspend our judgment until we can consult what the earliest Christians believed on this issue. And then when you do that, suddenly you're struck by the fact that the earliest Christians, beginning, for example, with St. Ignatius of Antioch, who was a disciple of St. Peter, he was primarily a disciple of St. John, both of whom were in the upper room with Jesus at the Last Supper. And St. Ignatius of Antioch, who was martyred in the year 107, he says, and I'll conflate two passages from the letters that he wrote where he talks about the Eucharist, and he says, if you should meet somebody who doesn't believe what we believe, namely that the Eucharist is the flesh of Christ that suffered for our salvation on the cross, then stay away from him because he's teaching something that the apostles didn't teach. And he would know because he received this from the apostles. So my point is you can benefit the conversation by bringing into the conversation the testimonials of the early church fathers who say that this is, in fact, not mere bread or mere wine, but it has undergone an ontological change, and it actually becomes the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus. You'll find any number of the early church fathers emphatically making that claim. So then you can ask the person that you're discussing this with and say, well, doesn't it seem reasonable to you that these early church fathers, some of whom in the earliest days knew the apostles, and they understand it in a Catholic sense, not the Protestant sense? And again, there's no one single Protestant view, but many Protestants believe that it's just simply an ordinance. It's just simply symbolic and nothing more. And you can demonstrate conclusively that the early church did not understand it that way. So then the next natural question would be, how could they get it so wrong so quickly? If they knew the apostles and the apostles told them the right way to understand this, why all of a sudden are they teaching something that is clearly Catholic and not Protestant? And I would say that's an unanswerable question if you want to maintain that Protestant position. But it's eminently answerable if you are at least open to the Catholic Church's teaching. You can say, well, I guess the reason is because they were Catholic, which is the right answer. Mm-hmm. You see?
Wonderful. Thank you. And I'm going to add the word anamnesis to my arsenal and do some research on that. Did you say that is a Greek term?
Yes.
Where did you say that? What's the
That's a Greek term.
That's
it means remembrance. So when he says do this, so the do is poieo, to do, like you do it. It's a command, poieo, do it. And in this case, the it is the offering the sacrifice. So the word Eucharist appears there when he says, when he had taken some bread and given thanks. That's the word Eucharist, eucharisteo in the Greek. And so he broke it and he gave it to them, saying, this is my body which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. So the context is I'll put it this way. It's redolent of for example, King David referring to, I will do the bulls. Same word in the Greek Septuagint, by the way. To do the bulls was a way of talking about sacrificing these animals as part of the sacrificial system, both before and after Moses. So there's that. Something more to think about.
For more of The Patrick Madrid Show, visit relevantradio.com/Patrick.